Now, I'm going to just talk to you about urban birds or conserving urban birds. When I designed these slides, it was aimed at a local authority audience, more or less, but there's certainly lots of stuff that will be relevant across the board to all you guys. And just want to say thanks for the invite. I'm thrilled to be here in front of such an audience, and delighted to just be back in a room with people that are into all this stuff and working hard to sort of conserve our wildlife and stuff. It's just great. And there's loads of cross-pollination, excuse the pun, and it'd be great to talk to everyone. And I'm here for the next 48 hours or for the 2 days, so we don't have a table outside Birdwatch or anything, but if you need some advice on birds or you need to be put in touch with the right person in Birdwatch, please do talk to me over the next day or two. So get going. And I'm going to have to speak quicker than Fran did earlier to get through all these slides, so I'll do my best. Yeah. So, conserving birds in urban environments. So, first of all, it's important to say that there's no substitute for habitats. Habitats provide everything that a bird or wildlife needs for life. That's basically food, shelter, and protection. Food's obvious one, whatever it's worms, if it's berries, if it's whatever. Shelter is anywhere they can nest and roost. That could be hedgerows, that could be a reed bed, it could be, a pond, whatever habitat they require. And protection then is afforded to them through all manner of means. It could be your garden. Your garden affords certain protection because your neighbour can't come along with his roundup or his chainsaw or whatever. So it could be a seasonal warden. It could be a bylaw that prohibits certain activities during the year. It lowers disturbance or whatever. So if you can reduce stress for a species, they'll quite likely move into that area. But if stress sort of ratchets up, that's when you're going to start losing species. So really it's about making life as easy as you can for birds and other wildlife, and they will move in. So the sort of take home is that habitats, there's just good habitats. There's no substitute for it. Well-managed sort of corridors for wildlife as well, links up sites. It makes things a lot more tangible. So that could be sort of good, well-maintained road verges. It could be your riparian habitats. It could be hedgerows. So linkages are really, really important as well. So again, that should be sort of on the radar of local authorities at all time. Good planning practice. So this won't apply to, well, in terms of Brent geese is the example here. This is Brent geese in Dublin, really, really common. All the 4 local authorities in Dublin will be dealing with this on a planning basis all the time. And I know this, we're not sort of touching on planning, but it's an important point to make that if bad planning, and there's a lot of sort of, what I would say, just planning is a very strong tool for conservation sometimes. So it's an important one to note. Don't know why I put that in there. It's a nice picture. It's peregrine. They are an urban bird. Quite often find them in big towns and cities and stuff, and they eat our pigeons and do all that sort of stuff. So just, yeah, it's a pretty picture. Yeah, so good proactive conservation measures and projects. I do a lot of stuff on swifts, but earlier on, Gitty did a really nice slide on cavity nesters, on house sparrows, really slick stuff. So I'll definitely be stealing some of her information on that as well. So it's really good. But it's important as well, and she talked about the linkages there. Sometimes I talked about having somewhere for them shelter. So we can provide shelter with those boxes all day long, but if there's no food or nowhere for the house sparrows to hang out, you break that chain and they won't move in anyway, so it's pointless. So you have to make sure you're getting the right advice at the right times and for the right species. And again, good awareness and promotion. I mean, the pollinator plan is fabulous. Really impressed by it, and to the point where we tried to duplicate it a little bit when we developed the Saving Swifts guide, sort of try like a one-stop shop for people. You pick up the book, you know exactly what you're going to do at the end of it, and that's great. That's what good awareness should be. And again, just want to brag about this. In Laois at the minute in my hometown, we have a Creative Ireland project. And again, talking about cross-pollination, Amanda mentioned it across the arts and heritage sectors and stuff. If you get the right people together, you can do some good stuff. And this is a mural that's going up on the side of a pub right outside the community school in the middle of Mount Mellick. And the reason it's there is because Mount Mellick has the strongest population of swifts in the county. And we just want to raise awareness to it. And it's just a really sort of beautiful piece of public art. So that'll be finished on Friday. We hope. So the artist James Kerwin, he's on Instagram if you want to check him out. He's doing that at the minute. So it's just something to put on your radar that we're quite proud of. So urban birds, why do we care? So there's a thing called the Bucky List. It's the Birds of Conservation Concern in Ireland. It's compiled by conservationists and the MPWS and Biodata Centre and all those people with all the information and data we have. We know what the populations of various birds and various bird families and groups are doing. There's a red list. If you're on the red list, you're basically shagged. You're on the way out. In Ireland, we're on the edge of many species range because we're way out there on the Atlantic edge. The next stop is North America. So if you're a curlew, if you're a corncrake, you're not going to make it to America to breed. So we're right on the edge. So we always see the decreases in populations on the edge first. So really it's important for us as conservationists to get things right in Ireland, to try insulate the rest of the population across Europe and further east from the changes that are going to happen. So it's important that we do that. This is the amber list here, and if I click this again, what are you seeing? Oh yeah, there. So yeah, there's 10 species there I would consider urban birds on the amber list, and on the red list we've 3 there, including swift. What else there? Swift, grey wagtail, and barn owl. And they're all there for various reasons. Some people say barn owls are doing great in this country at the minute. They are. But across their range, they're doing really bad. And so it's important that we get things right, like I said. So there are different motivations for those species going on there. And I'll talk you through it as I go through the various species groups. So I've broken it down into groups to try to keep some sort of pattern on what I'm trying to say. So gulls, there's no such thing as a seagull, by the way. They're as terrestrial in certain contexts as they are a seagoing bird. The top 2 photos are where they should be, on nice islands off the coast, fishing and sort of sustaining themselves naturally. Below is what we're seeing today. So roof nesting gulls in our towns and cities, living on chips and scraps and rubbish and refuse and all sorts of stuff. The reason for that is because on the islands we've basically disturbed them to the point where they can't nest there anymore safely. We fill those islands with invasive species, and we have also emptied the seas of fish. So they're stuck. The stress has risen in their natural places, and they've moved then into towns and cities where they can tick those boxes. So if you're an urban gull, a block of flats or a hospital roof or a row of townhouses is basically an island in an urban area, and it's got vertical cliffs which protect you from all the ground predators. It's a perfect place to nest and rear young. It makes a lot of sense. The streets below you are full of food and full of opportunities. And there's certain protections of living in a city as well. The guys can't come and take pot shots at you with a shotgun or whatever, like if you're out the country or anything else. So cities are a good place for gulls to hang out. It makes a lot of sense for them. So that's the reason they're there. They're not here to bully us. They're not here to take your sandwiches. They're not here to sort of attack your chihuahua. They are there because they are trying to survive and rear their own young. That's why they're there. Sort of when we're on the topic of seabirds, and Punchis mentioned it, we're going to get a lot of problems now in the winter with bird flu, and it's going to start affecting our urban birds as well, and your urban gulls, and you're going to start getting dead gulls in your streets in the local authorities that get sort of roof nesting gulls. So it's just something to have on your radar, and it is coming down the line, and it's just one of those things to be aware of and prepare for, because you can't leave carcasses with bird flu, affected with bird flu, hanging around on the streets, because you're going to start a lot of problems with urban pigeons, with pets, with all sorts of stuff. So it's just something to have in the back of your head. So there is a huge, this is pretty alarming. So 50 or 90% decline in herring gulls on the coast in 30 years. Whereas if you were to ask anyone, they said, no, the gulls are booming in Dublin. They're booming in Balbriggan, they're booming in Dungarvan, whatever. That may be true, but on the islands, they're going extinct. So we know that from good data. We know that from Seabird 2000. So it's really important, going back to the data element of this conference, it's really important that you gather that data. And there was an excellent report compiled by Alan and Lauder, the consultants on urban birds lately, and we're starting to see them now as far inland as Mullingar and Athlone. So it's coming to a local authority near you. It's not just a coastal problem or issue anymore, and it's going to be it's a conservation issue because of the collapse in those. So it's not just Una Duggan, our policy officer in Birdwatch Ireland, being a pain in the arse, trying to get you to sort of look after the gulls. It's a huge conservation issue. So that's why we bang on about it, and we're pretty angry about the derogation in Balbriggan and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it has to be mentioned. Birds of prey, so to put it on your radar, it's not just peregrines that we get in our towns and cities. Sparrowhawks are obviously quite common across gardens and golf courses, anywhere sort of urban parks, all that sort of stuff. Long-eared owls as well, they're the guys you hear screeching sort of late summer. It sounds like a rusty gate. You get a lot of those in mature hedgerows and in mature trees and stuff, so urban parks, big gardens, you get them, and yeah, they're around. And barn owls will come right into towns as well, because they're looking for rodents and stuff. I see them in Rossgrey, for example, quite often, right up into the town in Rossgrey. I'm down in Laois, so I'll be sort of going up and down that way regular enough. So it's just one sort of example I know of. They are declining in many birds. I mean, barn owls are red listed. They are in Ireland. They've had a bit of an upshot the last few years because of the introduction of the white-tooted shrew, so they've got more food, and it sustains a bigger population, and there's a lot of conservation work over the last sort of 2 decades for barn owls, and it is turning the tide for barn owls. For example, sparrowhawk there declined by just over sort of 10%, and we know that through CBS data, Countryside Bird Survey, and people think they're sort of common as muck, and they are, but a 10% decline is significant, and if you were to double that over the same, you know, you're losing a big chunk of your population pretty quickly, so it's something we have to keep an eye on. The problem, and the thing I want to put on the radars of the local authorities for raptors is secondary poisoning through rodenticide. So when we talk about pollinators, we're sort of trying to encourage the local authorities to ease off on the Roundup and the herbicides and all that sort of stuff. With birds of prey, they get a thing called secondary poisoning. It's when they pick up the rats and the mice that are sort of not dead, they're infected with the poison. It takes a while for that to sort of build up in the rat system and for them to die. So it's an easy target for a bird of prey, be it a sparrowhawk or a barn owl. And over time, then it builds up in the barn owl. Let's just use barn owl as an example. And they don't actually always fall out of the sky dead of poisoning. It does become toxic to a level that they will eventually just die of liver failure. But normally what happens is it scrambles their sort of it messes with their brains and their nervous system. And normally they just sort of end up sort of running into a car or a van or a truck on a road where they're trying to get an easy meal along the N7 or whatever. So that's normally where we find them. John Lusby, my colleague, who's our raptor conservation officer, he's done a lot of work with Wexford County Council. They collect the carcasses and they test them, and the numbers are terrifying. Wait till you see this. So yeah, so the pathway obviously into the owls is rodents. Through post-mortems and toxicology analysis of 69 barn owls, the carcasses collected between 06 and 11, 88.4% had a second-generation anticoagulant rodenticides. So basically, they storm all your common rat poisons. Basically, they're anticoagulants, and they cause the rodents to die of internal bleeding eventually, basically, is how they work. Pretty gross. Has to be done. Obviously, there's public health issues. I'm not saying sort of local authorities are going to be able to wean themselves off rodenticides. I don't know how much they use, but it's certainly something they need to start thinking about and find alternatives. And there's heaps and heaps of good advice on this stuff. Yes, so just I don't need to read that. So, but it's not just barn owls. There's a pile of stuff obviously that eat small rodents, and it's getting into the food chain, and it's bad for them all. None of them can survive it. So it's important that we address our use of rodenticides. There's a Think Wildlife campaign's been going on for many years. All the bird of prey organisations and experts sort of support it and back it, and that's the QR code there. You can take a photo or whatever. It'll link you to all the information you need. I'll leave that up for just a second before I move on. God, we're flying. Okay. So yes, urban bird, Brenkies. So this won't be appropriate to all local authorities, but certainly down in Waterford, in Dublin, in Louth, and other places, it's a big planning issue. There's just so many great photos of Brenkies. I'm just going to go through them. They're deadly. They've adapted to living amongst us. They're an Arctic breeding goose. They go up to sort of north. They go up to North Arctic Canada, a place called Ellesmere Island. The guys we get here, and they breed up there. Over the last 40 years, they've been doing really, really well. But the problem is, our population, we have the population of pale, we have 90% of the pale-bellied brent geese, that population. So if things go wrong in Ireland, we could lose that entire population pretty quickly. There's pretty close relatives of them as well, loads of them. But the problem is, in the last few years, 5 to 10 years, they've been almost successfully fledging zero young at all. So there's an Irish Brent research group. They follow them to Canada every year, to Greenland, Iceland, where they stop over, and then back to Strangford Lough and down into Dublin when they return here for the winter. And they colour ring them, and they know they can track the family groups of birds, and they can tell exactly how many chicks they have with them, because mum and dad will return and they'll bring their chicks with them, their juveniles. And 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we were seeing them returning with 2 and 3 chicks. Now we're seeing them returning with none. So whatever's happened in the last few years, climate change stuff, there's snow geese moving into the range, disturbance here, loss of eelgrass and their winter feeding grounds, loads and loads of stuff happening to geese so that we need to keep an eye on. So from a planning point of view, again, it's death by 1,000 cuts. There's apartments going up on the football pitches where they graze once the eelgrass is gone from the coastal areas. There's football pitches being turned to astroturf to make them all weather. It's all sorts of stuff. So it's that cumulative effects that's really affecting the brent geese. So something to put on your radar. And they're spreading out around the country a bit more. So I think it will become a planning issue in more local authorities than just the Dublin ones. So yeah, they just get all over the place. They're amazing. I mean, you can walk right up to them. And if you've never seen them, it's worth a trip to Dublin, to Bull Island, or somewhere in Fingal, or wherever, just to get a look at these guys. They're quite amazing. So that's the place. That's how far up. That's Ellesmere Island, up past Greenland in Canada. It's cool. There's just the what am I talking about? Yeah, so protecting them, so just careful planning. There is some proactive stuff. The Dublin Bay Biosphere, they're trialling, am I going way over? Sorry, I'll go through that. So just, yeah, blah, 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 blah. This is a nice project we did. This is just an appeal to Punchius. We did a project with Dublin City Council a few years ago called the Brent Goose Ambassadors, where we went to the schools to tell them about the ecology of the geese, the family groups, all that sort of stuff. Then we brought them out to Bull Island to see them in their natural habitat. And then the kids go back to the local parks and pitches later on in the season to count the geese there as well. It's really nice, and we tell them all about the disturbance and stuff. And what you get there is, you get the kids then, there's like dog walkers on Bull Island and stuff, and they'll be like, hey, mister, put your dog on a lead, you know, you're disturbing the geese and stuff. So it's that pester power that you're trying to sort of adopt in the kids, and it works really well. I have a lot of slides, so I'm just going to fly through this. River birds, again, lots of them in our towns. Anywhere there's a river, riparian zones, you get these species. All beautiful, charismatic things. So, but we have declines. Here's San Martin, 29.6% decline shown to us by CBS data. So really concerning. Lots of issues. Invasive species, water quality, pollution problems, invasive species, greenways, lads, badly planned greenways, just the worst thing ever. Like, can't say that strongly enough. Flood management, bad flood management, hard engineering. Can be disastrous for riparian zones. It's just something you need to do better, and it's one of those things. There are proactive measures. You can install San Martin banks. They love those. They'll move in anywhere. They nest in your eye, really. If you build it, they will come. Lots of good examples of those. Here's a nice one on Dermot Doran's farm down in Kildare. Built it himself on his pond on his farm. It's fully occupied now. Harper's Island in Cork has one. They built one recently. It's outside the city, but they would work quite well in an urban context. They live in quay walls all the time. There's a colony in the middle of Banagher. There's one on the Liffey. A wee video here as well, just show you. That's the one in Harper's Island, just down in Cork. Really, really good. Yeah, so if you're like, when you're planning flood management works, hard engineering, think about putting these guys in. They work. Kingfisher Banks, Do Hollow project a few years ago, developed I have the QR code there. They have technical documents showing you how to provide nests for kingfishers, grey wagtails and dippers, which is important now, especially in modern bridges. Old bridges used to have potholes and stonework and stuff that there was opportunities for these birds to nest in, but now there's not, because it's just basically precast concrete. In places like Germany, probably where Giddy's working as well, they probably have thought about this. They pre-mold cavities for fur dippers and grey wagtails into the concrete before they install them. So we need to be thinking that way as well, designing for wildlife. Have to talk about cavity nesters, especially swifts. 60% decline in their population in the last 20 years. Really, really scary stuff. Red listed, but there is ways. The problem is we've built them out of our housing stock, basically. Houses are too modern, materials are too good, there's passive housing. There's not space for a spider to get into your house, never mind a nesting swift or a starling or a house sparrow. So we have to sort of put those places back into use. So you get really, really clever commercially available bricks now. You can colour match them. You can fit them externally or whatever. But really, I think the only show in town really is the ones that are built into the facade of the wall. Designers like them, engineers like them, builders like them. They look much better, and it's an easy win with swifts. And house sparrows, as Giddy said, and even stuff like blue tits, which have less maybe conservation value or need, but they work for those too. Loads and loads of those things available. Project we did down in Laois this year with the town village renewal scheme, a few quid, but that quadrupled the number of available nesting swifts in that town. There was 11 found during the survey, active ones, and now they've got 40 available nest sites to them, just on a small community project. There's the bricks integrated into the walls there, really tidy job. There should be in all new public buildings, 100%. And like Giddy's quote was, what would I say, compulsory to build with biodiversity. That's the way it should be across the way. And in Kildare was the first one, but in our county development plan, they have a line just saying provision must be made for nesting swifts in all new public buildings, or all new suitable buildings, I think. So that just allows then the developer, it just leaves it to the developer to sort out. The council don't have to worry about it, but it's really good, and it's in a lot of other county development plans now. And any time there's a county development plan being renewed or updated, we try get a line in there for swifts. And we now start to think about house sparrows do well in this country, but they're doing really well in Britain, which is normally a reflection of what's going to happen here. So we do need to think about what Giddy's talking about as well. Here's some examples. Castlebar Leisure Centre, Swift Conservation Ireland, Linda Huxley, brilliant. If you ever need someone to help with this stuff, Linda's deadly. Portlaoise Library, just recently we did it as well. So here's the finished product. You can barely see them there at all. When that's painted, you won't see them, and the swifts will come and go happy out. This is one in Baltinglass. Deirdre will know about Deirdre Burns. Will have helped Brian with this, and that's an old convent converted to a primary care centre, and a local guy who's mad into decided he's like, it'd be great if there was swifts up there in that tower. So here's what it looked like before Brian got in. Then he built these bespoke boxes behind the latticed windows, put in a collar system to lure them in, and there you go. So here's one, international one. This is Baku Tower. There was a Eurovision there a number of years ago. There's a video there if you scan that QR code. But that apartment block next door to Baku Tower, they had to do some restoration work on Baku Tower. So in that ugly apartment block next door, they put in that sculpture of those 3 swifts. It's made completely out of swift boxes, and it's now fully occupied. There's a few hundred swifts living there now. It's amazing. Future threats in our cities. Giddy will know all about this. Liam will know about it. Invasive species. This is a ringneck parakeet. Already a little population in Dublin. They can compete for cavity nesting birds, for the cavities of woodpeckers, of coal tits, of various species like that. So they oust our native species, if you like. So it's something we need to keep an eye on. It needs to be on the radar of certain local authorities. There's the map, the MBDC map, just showing you some of the nucleus of the population in Dublin there, in North Dublin. Lots of resources available to help you with stuff. That's the Wildlife in Buildings book. There's 2 of those, just published last year. QR code there, Saving Swifts, the same, all you need to know. For the engineers in the audience or anyone from local authority, Designing for Biodiversity is a brilliant book. It's got all the technical drawings and stuff there. Loads of other stuff available from the Heritage Council and local authorities over the years as well. A quick plug for the podcast that Amanda mentioned. It's excellent, if I do say so myself. We're delighted to be able to do that, and we're going to continue that next year as well. Yeah, and thanks.